So gut health is a lifestyle. Kind of think of it like a maintenance lifestyle that you may do, versus gut healing is going to be something that's going to be more short term in order to heal the body, which can be very, very restrictive for a very short period of time. So there's really like a few different things that can be off with the gut, which determines how long it could potentially take. So some of the most common things that I see is just chronic inflammation in the gut. And this inflammation can be stemming from a food intolerance, food sensitivities, things that maybe just aren't good for the gut, even if you aren't sensitive to it. So these could be like vegetable oils, industrial seed oils, a bunch of sugar, artificial sweeteners in your diet. All of these things can trigger inflammation. There's also emotional stressors too. So if you're someone who has a lot of work stress, you're not getting a lot of sleep as well, that can also trigger a lot of gastrointestinal inflammation. We also have to look at medications. So if you're somebody who's been on a lot of antibiotics, who's been on birth control, who's also been on a lot of NSAIDs, all of those things can also trigger a lot of inflammation in the gut. So if you have a lot of inflammation in the gut, healing that can usually take up to 1 to 2 months, depending on the severity of it. But part of that process is going to consist of removing the things that are causing inflammation and knowing what those are, and then adding things in to actually reduce the inflammation. So it's adding in the damaging foods, adding in things that are going to be anti-inflammatory. And with a lot of the lab testing that I do with my practice, I will say the majority of people are really, really high in something called omega-6s. So these are pro-inflammatory fats, and they're really low in their anti-inflammatory fats. So this in of itself just makes them inflamed. So healing inflammation can take, maybe upward to 2 months if it's a bit more inflamed. But it can also take, as little as 1 month if there's not as much inflammation, if we can pinpoint what those triggers are and add in some good foods to help healing. Our gut lining regenerates about every 3 weeks, they've shown with studies. So as long as we can keep those foods out, add in the good, that gut lining can heal and repair. Now, sometimes there can be more severe gut issues. Now, this can be what I like to call gut dysbiosis or SIBO. So both of these mean just bacteria imbalances in the gut. And when there's a bacteria imbalance in the gut, this can definitely take some more time. So this is our entire microbiome, which has like billions and billions of these microscopic little bacteria. We have bacteria, we also have yeast and fungi, we have protozoa. All this reside in our gut. And when this is off, this is going to cause a whole host of issues as well too. This can actually trigger a lot of the inflammation, can trigger food sensitivities. But what's kind of difficult when we have a microbiome imbalance is it's not really a true sensitivity. It's more of the bacteria fermenting on the foods that we're eating, which are oftentimes carbohydrates and sugars in our diet, producing a gas, producing bloating and distension, and a lot of those issues. So when we're healing a bacteria-related issue, sometimes if it's not very severe, we can heal it, in about, I'd say, 4 months. And that's going to be consisting of still pulling out things that are bad for our gut microbiome, industrial seed oils, vegetable oils, artificial sugars in general, working on that stress, and then adding in things that are good for our gut microbiome. So omega-3 fish oils, lots of polyphenols, which is what give fruits and vegetables their bright colors. So these can be things like blueberries, lots of good berries, peppers, even things like dark chocolate. Those are great polyphenols for the gut. Lots of fruits and vegetables. So those are going to be fibers that feed bacteria in your gut, sometimes adding in some good supplements. Probiotics are great, of course, as well too, supplements like glutamine. So over time, our gut can naturally kind of reset its microbiome when we're supporting it in the right way. Now, when someone's gut is like really, really, really dysbiotic, which means it's really off with the ratio of bacteria, sometimes we have to do something called some weeding and reseeding with the gut. And when we do that with the gut, we usually do some kind of an antimicrobial protocol. So you can kind of think of an antimicrobial protocol kind of like an antibiotic. where we're literally kind of just getting rid of a lot of the bad bacteria in the gut. And normally with my practice, this can take up to 2 months to just eradicate a lot of that bad bacteria. Sometimes there can even be pathogenic bacteria there. So there can be parasites, there can be fungal overgrowths. And this is when we kind of dive into more severe gut imbalances. So eradicating a lot of the bad stuff in the gut, is definitely not a fun process. I actually had to go through that myself, and I've gone through it with a lot of my clients. But normally that will take at least 2 months to do, but that still doesn't mean that the gut is healed. So after we've eradicated a lot of the bad bacteria for the gut, we actually have to then re-inoculate the gut with good bacteria. And that's not going to be just probiotics, popping a pill every single day. That's going to be through diet. So the foods that we're putting into our body, so trying to introduce a lot more types of fibers that can feed good bacteria. So we like to call these prebiotics. This will, yes, be different types of supplements as well too. And this can definitely take some time. So for people who have very, very severe dysbiosis or SIBO in the gut, I usually tell them this will take at least 6 months to a year to fully kind of reset that microbiome. And for me, that was like a lot of what my issues were, is I had a lot of dysbiosis in my gut. My gut was also very leaky, very inflamed, but I was always in pain after every time I ate. So it took a lot of this process to really heal my gut. But, it is very difficult to do a lot of these gut healing diets. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, because it's not like a weight loss diet. It's not like something that we can, just cheat on every now and then, because when we eat these foods, when our gut is really, really inflamed, it can definitely kind of take us back a few steps as well too. For people who have autoimmune conditions, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, that can even take a bit longer. That can even take upward to about 1 to 2 years to fully heal the gut. And that's because our immune system is usually pretty activated when we have an autoimmune condition. And normally where we see Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, we'll also see all of these other stuff we've talked about. We will see the gut's inflamed. We will also see some dysbiosis with the bacteria in the gut. And we'll also see some of this leaky gut as well too. So part of healing Crohn's and ulcerative colitis is kind of a lot of the things that we already talked about. But it's also reducing any kind of immune activators to go along with it. So this is repairing the leaky gut, removing food triggers, eradicating good bacteria, healing that gut lining that's been a little bit leaky and inflamed, and then also bringing down that overall immune response as well too. So for these people, it's definitely a little bit of a longer process, but I just had a client come on my podcast, and we're going to be sharing her episode here probably in the next month, and it took her about a year to fully heal, and she suffered from actually an inflammatory bowel disease, an autoimmune condition herself. So it's very, very possible to heal, but when we're dealing with these gut issues, I just wanted to come on here because it is very, very different than overall gut health. And there's a lot online on gut health, and I'm an advocate for gut health, but gut health is more of like the maintenance phase. It's the things that we do that is going to be more long-term, sustainable. It's eating the healthy diet full of a lot of those good fats. It's eating a lot of these polyphenols and fibers. It's keeping our stress low. It's adding in gut healthy supplements like probiotics, L-glutamine I've talked about quite a bit. And that can maintain your gut health over the long term. But I'm mainly speaking to the people who suffer with really chronic gut issues, or their gut is off, because gut healing is not going to be the same thing, because you oftentimes can't tolerate a lot of the foods that somebody can when they're having a gut, like when they're following like a gut healthy type diet. You can't tolerate a lot of vegetables, you can't tolerate a lot of fiber. And the number one thing I oftentimes hear from like the clients that I begin to work with is, oh my gosh, I just started to eat healthier. I just started to add in all these vegetables and these fibers, and I'm just like blowing up like a balloon. And that's often a sign that you have a microbiome imbalance going on there, because you're adding in fibers which feed bacteria, which is causing more of this bloating and distension. So it's not the food that's the problem, it's oftentimes the gut microbiome. And this is kind of where functional medicine comes in, is because when we go to our traditional Western medicine doctors, they don't look at the gut microbiome really. They do some standard tests. They may do a colonoscopy, endoscopy, CT scan, MRI, some basic blood work, and they're going to rule out anything major, but they're really not looking at things from like an overall microscopic level where we're dealing with microbiome imbalances. This is really going to be working with a functional medicine specialist who looks at these type of things, and then also works with you on the diet and the lifestyle side. So oftentimes I'll hear from my clients, they went to their doctor and they're so frustrated because I didn't feel like they got much attention, and they really didn't help them dive into the why. But these really aren't the type of people we want to go to for these type of issues. It's definitely good to rule out anything major going on there, like there's not any kind of Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, anything like that that could be really, really bad. But more often than not, if you're somebody who has like IBS, and you're kind of struggling with getting that figured out, it may be worth going to see someone who's a registered dietitian, who's going to deal with more of the food side of things, someone who's more in the world of functional medicine, who looks at the gut microbiome. Neuropaths are also a really great option as well too. And then just like losing weight, depending on how long it's going to take you to heal your gut, there's a lot of other factors that can play a role. Cheating, as we know, when we're trying to lose weight, when we're trying to get those that six-pack abs, and you have one too many cheat meals, it may slow down the process. So when you're cheating with foods that are damaging to the gut, it can definitely slow down that entire process. If you're not adding in enough of the foods that are actually healing to the body, because food is medicine, and the foods that we're wanting to add in should be very healing and strengthening for our gut microbiome and strengthening for our gut lining. And then also just how compromised the gut is in the first place. That's going to really depend on how long it's going to take. And then stress, right? So our digestive system completely shuts down when we're in more of this like fight or flight state, when we're in that sympathetic state. And our gut's going to do one or two things. It's going to shut down and completely expel everything, or it's going to hold on to everything. So that's another reason as to why it can be harder to heal the gut, because if you're somebody who's overtraining, maybe you have some unresolved trauma, that can definitely delay it as well too. When I had all of my gut issues, a lot of it stemmed from a physical part. I was competing at the time. I was definitely overtraining. My diet was good in terms of like body composition. Like I was eating the right macros, but I really wasn't eating foods that were like good for my gut. I was eating a lot of diet foods. There was artificial sweeteners in like my pre-workouts and my protein powders. I was doing other types of diet foods just to kind of get to that body composition I wanted to, but appease like all of the cravings that I was having. And then I ended up with all these gut issues, and looking back, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. Look at all the stuff that was in my diet, even though, physically I was in good shape. Look at the stress I was under with the training. And then you kind of combine that with maybe, medications or things like that, being on antibiotics, birth control. It's very, very easy for the gut to get off, to become unbalanced, to become leaky, to become inflamed. And if you're somebody who's ever suffered with a lot of gut issues, you know how much it affects your quality of life. You know how it affects just like your mental health, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, brain fog. You know how it affects your confidence as well too. So gut health is something that, luckily is becoming so much better, I guess known is the word I'm looking for. But healing is definitely a process. But after doing this for some time, it is so possible. It is so possible to heal, even if it's not even just gut issues. Healing, whether it be hormonal issues, whether it be depression, anxiety, you are so much stronger than you think you are, and it is so possible to heal, because I've been there. I've been in the place where I